Man, I've been playing Pokemon for a long time now, and I have to say I have used some really horrible Pokemon over the years. With the rise of the worst team series as well, I have had the opportunity to experiment some more of these Pokemon too. So with the worst team series in motion, and my sudden thought of really bad Pokemon to use in a standard game playthrough, I'm going to make a list of the top 10 worst Pokemon to use in a Pokemon playthrough. Now in making this list, I'm going to be basing these Pokemon on how useful they are, move pools, stats, and how trash they perform in certain Pokemon games. Overall, I don't think this list is going to be that hard to comprehend. I'm literally just going to be listing the top 10 Pokemon I think are the worst to use in any kind of standard playthrough. I don't think I need to explain any more than what I have to explain. I think you guys get it at this point. So that being said, let's list these terrible Pokemon. So if you guys have been watching my playthrough over on Twitch, you know that I am doing a worst team for Hoenn playthrough. Now at this point, I'm not done with the playthrough yet, but by the time this video goes up, I will probably be already done with the series. I may do worst team playthroughs on YouTube though, but we will see. Back to the topic at hand though, the reason I mentioned my series on Twitch is because you guys that were there got to see me using Volbeat in Generation 3. Now I will say that Volbeat is one of the worst Pokemon out there, and Illumise being much worse. Now it's really weird for both these Pokemon because Volbeat actually does better in Generation 3 thanks to the physical special split. Signal being the best bug type move it has access to is a physical bug attack that is 75 damage. With Volbeat's physical attack stat, that's actually not bad in Generation 3. However, in later gens like Generation 6, it gets yeeted out of any physical bug type attacks aside from U-turn. The rest are special, and 47 base special attack is very abysmal. Illumise is the opposite, performing better in Generation 6 and getting screwed in Generation 3. In Generation 3, Illumise had access to no bug type moves at all. Garbo. Generation 6, while better, but still terrible, Illumise does get access to Bug Buzz. That, however, cannot be learned until level 41. That's way too late, and by then you have better options for taking on Psychic and Dark-type Pokemon. Okay, I think I've summed up why I think Illumise and Volbeat are bad, and I hope you guys learned something new. Coming in at the number 9 spot, we have one of my least favorite Pokemon being Parasect. Now trust me, I love to put this Pokemon higher on the list because it truly is terrible and useless. However, I'm trying to be more objective here, and there truly are a lot more terrible Pokemon out there. But at the end of the day, that doesn't take away from the fact that Parasect is terrible and deserves its spot on this list. It's got a god-awful 405 base stat total, with its best stat being 95 in attack. Now that wouldn't be too bad if it had a wide variety of moves to choose from, but as you can see here, that's not the case. There are some decent moves here like X-Scissor, Dig, Leech Life, and Brick Break, but that's really it. All the other moves are either not very powerful or special, which you would never want to use on a Parasect. It only has okay defenses, and the HP is not good, and that speed makes me want to freaking cry. It's not really a mystery why this thing made the worst team for Kanto, and I really wouldn't be surprised if it made another worst team in the future. You could say that's just an unfortunate side effect of the bug type not being all that good, and I would agree to an extent. The bug type got an upgrade of sorts in later generations, which made some of them pretty decent. Unfortunately, Parasect remained one of the worst when everything was said and done, so that's why we have it down at number 9. Back at it for the worst team for Hoenn. At number 8, we have Slugma and Magcargo. Now, while I do find Magcargo not a horrible Pokemon, because at least it can hold its own somewhat, but that typing of Rock and Fire really makes it a walking target of weaknesses. Something I also want to mention is its speed. Yes, I know it's based around a snow-like creature, so naturally, of course, it's going to be slow. I'm not knocking it entirely because of its speed. I'm knocking it because of that speed allowing it to get hit first by super effective attacks, and the typing making it even worse. With so many weaknesses that Magcargo carries, you need to be very careful with where you place Magcargo. I do like the attacks Magcargo has access to though. It's not half bad on that aspect. Let's move on to Slugma now. Slugma is a big, fat no. Don't ever use Slugma on a team, and let me tell you why. It doesn't evolve until level 38. Imagine using such a frail and slow Pokemon and going through that hell. I did, and I hated it. Don't do it. In the number 7 spot, we have a bit of a surprising Pokemon, being the Crabominal line. I actually thought this would be higher on the list because of how bad it's portrayed in the community, and that may be true from a competitive standpoint for sure. It's also true from an in-game standpoint, but not to the degree that you're thinking. If you like this sting, then by all means use it in a playthrough. Just know it's not going to make things easy for you. Naturally, the only games the Pokemon are available in at the moment are the Alola games. Now, I don't think Brawler on its own is that bad. In fact, in the early game, it's actually pretty nice. Believe it or not, it's not the widest move pool type-wise, but it can learn some pretty solid attacks. But the problem is that you cannot evolve it until the very end of the game. Having a Pokemon with only 47 HP and special defense and 57 defense on your team through most of the game will become very annoying. And if you know nothing about Crabominable, you might think there has got to be a huge payoff for having to wait so long to evolve it. Well, think again. Sure, it might have a lot better HP and attack, but its defenses are only marginally better and it gets slower. I know Alolan Pokemon are all pretty slow, but to regress it down to 43 speed should be a crime. On top of that, the crappy ice typing makes it gain 3 more weaknesses. Now again, it is certainly usable, you just might have to overlevel it a bit to make it useful. But at the end of the day, why would you do that to yourself? Wrapping up the first half of the list, we have a Pokemon that is very familiar with lists like these, being Sunflora. Now, I like this line a lot. They're both very cute Pokemon, but man, I cannot deny that they suck badly. Sunkern is notorious for its ridiculously low stats, which were actually the lowest of all Pokemon until Wishiwashi came around. But at least that Pokemon has a more powerful form, whereas the best you can get with Sunkern is a very mediocre evolution. There is so much potential to do with Sunflora. Sure, it's got high special attack along with pretty okay HP attack and special defense, but that defense stat is pretty rough, and that 30 base speed, it's just baffling. And the cherry on top of all that is that it can't even utilize its one good stat well. Its move selection is straight up trash. Honestly, I think the only way this Pokemon can be saved is by revamping its move pool and giving it an evolution, or at the very least a regional variant that can rework its stats. It might not end up being the best Pokemon in the world, but it could be so much better than it is now. If you're an old follower of my Twitch account from 2017, you know the meme of our Lord and Savior, Lydia. For some reason, I went through a phase during that time that made me worship really bad mons, and I don't know why. But despite me really liking Lydia still today, even me owning a plush that was hand knitted, I will admit it's a really horrible Pokemon for a playthrough. Is it the worst though? No. And what saves it is its move pool. Its move pool is better than most of the Pokemon on this list when it comes to TMs. Training it up though, to only get a 55 base special attack and a 50 base physical attack stat, nah thanks, I'm good. Oh, but Mystic, it's not supposed to be an attacker, it's supposed to set up screens and be defensive. Bingo. And that's why it's not suited for a playthrough, especially when that HP stat is that abysmal, and there are better screen setters out there. Despite how much I enjoy Lydian's design, it is still horrible in both competitive and in-game. Oh Lord Arceus, man, where do I even begin with this poopy Pokemon? It looks like something very disturbing, and it just gets slammed down when there isn't weather present. Even when there is weather present, base 70 isn't great for cast form. It's better than the majority of the Pokemon on the list, stat-wise, sure, but to really take advantage of what cast form can do, there needs to be weather present. Plus, I don't really think people want to run a bunch of weather moves on a team, just specifically for cast form to do something. I was using cast form in my worst team for Hoenn playthrough, and it was so bad I literally dropped it for an HM Slave Tentacle for Waterfall, Dive, etc. It was just super difficult to grind up and not really worth giving a chance. I will say though, it did fulfill its role of being on the worst team. If I had to drop a Pokemon, it means I did a dang good job of building that worst team, let me tell you that. I know a lot of you guys were expecting Luvdisc on the list, and you're right to guess it. It's because it is. I have a lot of experience using this Pokemon, as I did an entire run with it in Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire. It's pretty safe to say that Luvdisc is trash, especially in Hoenn, because you don't get it until late game. That's also the reason why I didn't use it on the worst team for Hoenn in the first place. It was because it was so late to obtain. I wanted an earlier water Pokemon that was still bad, and Pelipper fit the category perfectly. Do I really need to explain why Luvdisc is bad though? Does anyone disagree with me that Luvdisc is bad? I don't think anyone does. I highly doubt it. It's got horrible stats and a fun but horrible move pool. If you're looking for a challenge, well then use Luvdisc. That is the one fact I can guarantee when using this heart-shaped troll. Speaking of trolls, that fun moveset I mentioned is great for trolling. But yeah, it's bad, and a lot of other water Pokemon outclass Luvdisc by a landslide. Now, the number 2 slot on this list may actually surprise a lot of you. Just shy of the number 1 spot, we have Shin Ninja. Now, in concept, Shin Ninja is a really cool Pokemon, being the molted shell of a Nincada once it evolves into a Ninjask, and only being attainable if you have an open slot in your party is really neat. And that Wonder Guard ability is top notch. But 1 HP? I get that you can't let this thing have a lot of health as it would be broken, but this makes it basically unusable. Sure, you can only get hit by fire, flying, rock, ghost, and dark type moves, but that guarantees all those moves are one-hit KOs. And if you haven't noticed, those aren't exactly uncommon types. Flying is the third most common type in the series, only slightly behind normal. Ghost, Dark, and Fire show up very often throughout all the games, whether they be in the form of a gym leader, Elite Four member, or an evil team member. Even Rock shows up every once in a while, so there really isn't ever really a good opportunity to escape its weaknesses. And even if you have the mindset of just using it as a glass cannon, it wouldn't do you any good as it's very slow of just good enough attack. I'm not saying this thing should be able to one-hit anything, but it should at least be able to put real work in. And unfortunately, I don't think it can. So I usually don't do honorable mentions, but I felt like doing some today because there are a lot of really horrible Pokemon out there to not use. So let's get these out of the way. Coming in first is Unknown. This is a no-brainer obviously, but I didn't want to put it on the list because so many of you are probably going to expect it. I wanted to make room for other Pokemon rather than just a Pokemon on here that only has access to one move. No duh, it's awful. Up next is Jumpluff. Now Jumpluff would have been higher on the list, but I still consider it as bad because it takes a while for Hoppip to get any decent grass moves, even in the newer games. In the Johto games, it may as well just splash with Magikarp. After Jumpluff, we have Chimecho. Chimecho is a very interesting choice. I know, I was pretty shocked too. Chimecho is so hard to find in general, and when you do, it's not really worth keeping because of what it can do, which is virtually nothing. Lastly, we have Farfetch'd. Note that as I record the audio for this bit, this was before the reveal of Farfetch'd's potential evolution. It's highly speculated, however, that this duck Pokemon will get an evolution. However, if the Pokemon revealed is not Farfetch'd's evolution, then Farfetch'd, while I do find cute and lovable, I think is the worst flying Pokemon in existence. Bad stats, etc., you guys get it, I think. These are honorable mentions, so I didn't want to get too into them. I hope it satisfies you guys though at least a little bit, especially with the Unknown. Oh, and Shuckle. Shuckle is also really bad. Hardly any damaging moves, tough to get, and the roles that it can play are better for memeing anyways. And finally, at the number 1 spot, we have Delibird. Oh man, this thing is just garbage when it comes to using it in a playthrough. Now granted, Farfetch'd made the worst team for Johto in lieu of Delibird, but that was simply because you would have to wait so long for it that it would defeat the purpose of the playthrough. But had it been available earlier, it would have been the golden turd of that team without a doubt. Sure, in Gen 7 it can learn Drill Peck, but every generation before that it can only learn Present by level up. What does Present do, you might ask? Well, it can either deal damage with a base of 40, 80, or 120 at random, or it can heal your opponent by 1/4 of the max HP. On top of that, it just sucks. Move pool? Awful. Stats? Terrible. I think you guys pretty much get that this Pokemon is bad, and I don't think I want its presence coming down my chimney neither. Well, that pretty much wraps up this top 10 list of the worst Pokemon to use for playthroughs. I don't think I was too rough on these Pokemon this time around, as I actually like a lot of the Pokemon on this list. I've actually even started to like Volbeat a little bit more because of using it on the worst team for Hoenn. Surprisingly, it's been the MVP so far. Overall though, these Pokemon are dumpster fires. Designs discluded, because the designs for these Pokemon are fantastic, unless you were talking cast form. Enough of my tangents though. Which Pokemon do you find to be the absolute worst for completing a playthrough with? Let me know down below and comment what your favorite worst Pokemon is. If you enjoyed the video, why not leave a like and subscribe to my channel with notifications on, that way you never miss an upload. If you want to support me further, consider following my Twitch where I stream a lot of Pokemon content and all kinds of other Nintendo content like Zelda, Fire Emblem, and much more. Want to support me further and gain cool perks? Check out my Patreon. Daniel Leone, Lady Crimson, Memory Martin, The Lazy Leo, Matthew Young, Awesome Lego, Jarrett Weezosted, and Sudden Grider did, and I want to thank them personally for going above and beyond. It means the world to me. I think I'm wrap this up though. I'm Mr. Gumbrand, and I will see you in the future for more awesome Pokemon content.